All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Collins. I'm an associate consultant here at IVAS. We're going to go over Forms Printer for Microsoft Dynamics GP 2010. And if you have any questions, if you would please wait till the end to ask, and I will do my best to answer them as you ask them. So let's get started with a brief overview of the agenda. I'm going to begin with an introduction of Forms Printer, what it is that Forms Printer offers, and what it is that Forms Printer does not offer. We'll go over what's new in Forms Printer. They release new versions fairly often, and you get some new pretty cool features with each one. So we'll go over what has been released in the most recent version. Then we'll go over how to set up Forms Printer, which includes installing Forms Printer on workstations, setting up your report server where you can draw the forms from that you use within GP, setting up the GP report engine. So that's once Forms Printer has been installed and you get GP pointing to the right report server. Then within your SQL reporting services reports, you will want to open Visual Studio and get the reports sent to the right destination as well. And then you actually set up Forms Printer within GP so you can use it and print your forms as you go throughout your daily business. And then at the very end, once we go through how we've set it up, I will do a couple demos just so you can see Forms Printer in action within Microsoft Dynamics. So a brief introduction and overview to Forms Printer. Forms Printer is a service offered by Accountable Software, and you can check them out online at accountable.com. The focus here within Forms Printer is the forms within Microsoft Dynamics GP, and what that means is it's focusing on things such as invoices, order forms, picking tickets. It has some checks and billing reports as well, but it's not going to be where you go for your business reports, your financial reports. It's really just forms that you want to print within Microsoft Dynamics. The latest versions, the most up-to-date versions that they have for Microsoft GP 10 is 10.51.97, and for GP 2010 is 11.00.97. And then you see the supported report types. Forms Printer can be used to print SQL reporting services reports, Crystal reports, or report writer reports. And as you see, I have the version 11.97 highlighted and the SQL reporting services highlighted. So from this point forward, what we will be dealing with is SQL reporting services within GP 2010. But the capabilities to use Crystal reports and report writer are also there, and it can also function in GP 10. So now look at what's new in Forms Printer. And we have what's new in the newest versions, the two that we just listed in the last slide. And then some of the more recent, even though they're not the brand new features that are available. So in the newest versions, you have consolidated emailing. So that's if you want to print a batch and Forms Printer is set up to email, let's say, a batch of invoices, and you just run the batch and you have multiple invoices going to one customer, then it will consolidate those into one email and just send multiple documents attached to one email to that one customer. And it will do that throughout the batch that you have just posted. You can also parameterize your file exporting, which is if you run a batch again, and instead of sending it to email, let's say you want to send it to a file location on your computer, you can set it up to send to specific file names so you can keep track of them more easily, or if there's just a certain way that your company prefers to keep things organized, you can do it that way. So in the more recent versions, or less recent versions, but still new from the past year or so, you can also set up vendor and customer class level forms printer setups, which is you can have different setups for different classes. Then you can go all the way into a vendor and customer level setup. So you can have one form print to a certain vendor class, but within that vendor class, send a different form to a specific vendor. You can also have scripted email addresses. So if you have email addresses stored somewhere on your system that is not within Dynamics GP, you can find those email addresses and send the email to those addresses from Forms Printer. Now when you are preparing to use Forms Printer, went over this briefly before, the first thing you need to do is install Forms Printer. Then I have created a report server. Generally, report servers are created when SQL reporting services are installed, but if for some reason it was not, then you want to make sure that you do have a report server set up. You need to define the report engine, and that is within Microsoft Dynamics GP. Then you want to deploy the SRS reports to the report server. Those are the reports that you will use as the forms within GP from Forms Printer. And then you want to define the forms in Dynamics GP, and that is Forms Printer Setup that we will go over in a few minutes. So the first thing in those steps is to install Forms Printer. The installation is fairly simple. You just want to get the latest version of Forms Printer from the Accountable Software website. I have the link listed here. It's just accountable.com. Within accountable.com, you can navigate to their products and then Forms Printer, and it has a list of the most recent versions, which you can click on and download directly from their website. You'll also want to have the registration keys so that Forms Printer will give you the entirety of its functionality. If you try to use Forms Printer without the registration keys, you will run into just all kinds of issues along the way. So the basic steps when installing Forms Printer: once you have downloaded the file from their website, you just run the executable file on the first workstation and just follow the wizard that comes along with it. It's fairly self-explanatory. You then run Microsoft Dynamics GP, or the Microsoft Utilities rather, as you want to do so as an administrator, and just add the SQL Server objects and then update the dictionary files. When you download the executable file from their website, it comes along with instructions how to do so, and once again, these are fairly easy with the instructions. Then within Dynamics GP, you want to enter the registration keys, and then just repeat those steps for the additional workstations, any workstation that you want to be using Forms Printer with. So now that Forms Printer has been installed, you want to make sure you have a reporting service or a report server. So this is just a view of the report server I have set up. This is the one we will be using in the demos today. The report server is used to store the data sources in the reports, which will be used as the forms. And then security can also be added to this report server to make sure that only the certain ones have access to Forms Printer, or that Forms Printer only has access to certain reports. So once you have the report server set up, you need to set up the report engine, and this is within Microsoft Dynamics GP and Forms Printer, the Forms Printer setup. So as you see, the Forms Printer, once installed, once you've gone through the first step, when you open Microsoft Dynamics GP, Forms Printer will be available. And to get to Forms Printer setup, you hit the Microsoft Dynamics GP dropdown, then highlight Tools, then Setup, then Company, and you should see Forms Printer is now a new option near the bottom of that list. So you see here when we go through and click Forms Printer, it will open the Forms Printer Setup window, which is what we're looking at here. And you see it doesn't have anything set up yet. We will go in later on and direct it to different forms that we want to use. So right now, since we are setting up the report engine, there's just a drop-down, again, at the top of this window, Report Engine Setup. And since we're using SQL Server Reporting Services, we're going to click that option. And it opens the SQL Server Reporting Services Setup window, where you need to enter your SSRS report server URL and the web services URL for the accompanying report server. So now once we have it set up within GP, you want to create the report server project. This is where you'll actually create the forms using SQL Server Reporting Services. And with these forms, you can have all kinds of customization. That's the real power coming from Forms Printer, is you can use all of the customizations that are available within SSRS reports within GP while you're printing your forms. So you see, I went through for the demos later and created the Forms Printer templates project and have some basic forms already set up in there. So what I did, I created the shared data sources and the customized reports and forms that we will be using. And you'll see these when we go through the demos. I use the Visual Studio just so you have an understanding of how I've set up what we will see. And now we need to define the report server project, or the report server on the report server project. So to do this within Visual Studio, I drop down the project drop-down window and select Forms Printer Templates Properties, the last option there. Once I've selected that, it opens the Forms Printer Templates property page. And the big things here are to define the data source folder, the report folder, and the target server URL. Once those three have been set up, you can deploy projects or reports from this project to be used as forms from that report server. And deploying is very easy as well. So you see, once we have the report set up, you see in the right-hand side of the Visual Studio window, there are the reports that I have available. So all you need to do is right-click on the reports, or on the report you would like to deploy, come down and click Deploy, and that will send this report to the report server that you just set up. And now the report is available on the report server, and Forms Printer within GP can pull these reports to be used anytime you want to print a form out of Microsoft Dynamics. So the final step before we can begin using Forms Printer within GP is to designate the reports that have been deployed that you want to use within Forms Printer. So now this is back to the Forms Printer setup window. This is when you drop down the Microsoft Dynamics GP option, then hit Setup, and Company, and Forms Printer. So the first thing to do is to click New, and you want to include a new report. Once you click that, you will be given several options on what kind of report you would like to add. So including the new report, you select the product. We will generally be using Microsoft Dynamics GP. In the series, you have purchasing, sales, and I believe manufacturing also has some availability in Forms Printer. And then the specific report that you would like to use. The one I'm setting up here is for a purchase order and the blank form. So using purchase order processing, blank form, now when we print one of those from GP, it will use the report that's been deployed to the report server and not the basic report that comes along with Microsoft Dynamics. So once you've added the reports you like, you need to make sure that you click Save. If you close without saving, the changes will not take effect. So just to review quickly what has been set up, Forms Printer has been installed. We double-checked to make sure that we have a report server available. We pointed Forms Printer within GP. We pointed that report engine to the report server. We have a SQL Server Reporting Services project set up, and that project is also pointed to the report server. Once the reports have been deployed, we then had the Forms Printer report set up within Microsoft Dynamics GP. So now that we have everything set up within our system, we can actually look at some demos and see how you would use Forms Printer in live action. So I'm going to close out of this and open up my Microsoft Dynamics GP. And we're going to open up the Forms Printer setup. So the drop-down, Tool, Setup, Company, and Forms Printer. And here it is. So you see, I already have some reports set up in here. I have a purchase orders for a blank form and other form. And I also have sales invoices for blank paper and other form as well. So once we've done this, once we have these new reports available to us within Forms Printer, there's some cool setup options that we have within the Forms Printer setup as to where you want them to print. The three main options are if you'd like it to print to a disk file, so you'll save the report to a file somewhere within your system. You can send it to a printer, or you can send it to email. If you have email set up on your customers or your vendors, you can send them these documents as attachments and not actually have to print. So this can be very useful if you're printing, say, several hundred invoices at once. You don't want to have to print them and send them up and mail them. You can just email them automatically. And you don't even have to deal with saving them somewhere as a file and then finding the file and emailing it. Forms Printer can do that automatically. So the first option that we have set up is send it to a printer. The basic settings here are which printer you would like to use. So you have the options here. You can use the default system printer. You can ask each time, or you can specify a printer. I just have the default system printer selected. Otherwise, you could specify a printer down below in the printer expansion box. And then the number of copies to print. If for some reason you like to have a duplicate, you can make sure that Forms Printer automatically prints a second copy, and you don't have to go back and reprint. So with those being, that one's pretty self-explanatory. You see, since I did make some changes, it'll ask me to change or save the changes, so I'm going to go and choose yes. The second option is to send it to a disk file. And there are several formats that you can send it to. I have a PDF selected. You see that you can also have XML documents, images, several types of HTML documents, or you can send it to an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to leave mine as an Adobe PDF file. And then you specify the folder that you want to save the file as when you print. So to specify this, I'm going to expand by clicking the blue expansion button. And this is where you can set up the parameterized export options that I mentioned before. So if you see down here below in the bottom window, it has the path name. And mine is I'm sending it to my hard drive, just user documents, A columns, which is my personal location, sending it to my desktop. And I have a folder created that is just called purchase orders. So then within purchase orders, I also want the file to be named with the vendor ID separated by an underline, and then the purchase order number for the file that's being printed. So anytime I print this, it will be sent to my purchase orders folder with the name of the vendor ID, an underscore, and the name of the purchase order. It is important that until you begin entering the parameterized name, so before I start entering this information, the highlighted information here, I do want to make sure that the location does in fact exist. Forms Printer will not be able to create the location when it's printed. The location has to be there beforehand. So I have double checked and I made sure that the purchase orders folder does exist on my desktop, so it can be used later on. You can also add additional naming parameters here. So you can go from the customer or the vendor address here, the vendor master file, and then there are several other options. The purchase order files if you have comments that you would like to add, or if there's a customer related, let's say a drop ship, you can use the customer as well. So anytime I print the purchase order other form, it will be sent to a file. So I'm going to go and save that just to make sure the changes exist. And then the final option is to send something to email. So we'll set one of those up right now. So right now I'm going to set the invoice other form to send to mail. So you come down, you just select the to mail option. We're going to use Outlook. And this is where you can select if you would like to send multiple documents per email. So if I select this, and as I was saying earlier, you print a batch that sends multiple invoices to a single customer. With this selected, it will just send one email with multiple attachments and not one email for every document that's being sent. So I'm going to leave that selected. We're going to mail from the default Outlook user. Since this is on my local system, it just has mine, which is the default Outlook user. Or you can have multiple options there and send everyone from a specific Outlook user, not the default on that workstation. So now you have the mail to, which is where you want to send it. You can send it directly to a scripted mail list, or you can send it to an email address that is attached somewhere within Microsoft Dynamics GP. So you can send it to the bill to address, the ship to address, any of the master addresses that go along with that vendor or customer ID. We're going to send it to the document's bill to address, so we'll look on that specific document and the bill to address that is attached to it. And as long as there is an email address attached to that bill to address, it will send the email automatically. And now you get to the send option, and this actually is where you could specify if you want to send it automatically or have it postponed for a few minutes or a few hours. So you can send directly, which as soon as you post and print, the email will be sent. You can send it to a drafts folder, which it will just send to the drafts folder within Outlook. So if you want to review before actually sending, you can double check in the drafts folder before sending all the emails. You can save it to the outbox, similar to the drafts folder. It's just so it doesn't get sent automatically. You can save it to the outbox and then have it delay before it sends. Or you can just display the created email one at a time and send from there. So we're going to have it set up to send directly. As soon as I post and print, this document will be emailed to the customer. Now you want to set up the attachment format. Again, I'm going to send them as a WPDF. The attachment name, you can set up, again, using the parameters like we used when saving it somewhere to a disk file. For this, we just want it to say, we just want the transaction name, so the sales order processing number or the invoice number. So when you double-click the SOP number, it populates down here. Click OK, and you see that the attachment name will automatically fill in with whichever sales order processing number is associated with the file being printed and posted. Within the body text, you can set up default messages. So I have one created here, just named invoice. This is a message that will be sent out for invoices. You could also use this just to have several set up for if you're just having an order and you're not actually sending them an invoice yet, you can have one set up for orders as well. I'm going to use the invoice and then the subject text. Within the subject text, you can customize this as well. I'm just going to make this simple so you can have your customer, or let's say you wanted to make it look more customized. You can put dear customer name, so it will not say dear than that specific customer name. So thank you for your order, and then so anytime you send this, you will have the customized message sent to that specific customer. Click OK, and that's now what's going to be used. So anytime we send an invoice and print it using the other form, it will send an email to the appropriate customer. It is important to note that when setting up the emailing options, and if you have it set up to send directly, if you have the incorrect email address saved within Dynamics GP, it will send to the incorrect email address. So it is important when doing setup to double check and make sure that this is set up correctly so that Forms Printer can do its job as best as possible. So now that we have some of these setup options, I'm going to go ahead and save this and actually print a few so you can see Forms Printer in action. Close out of this. And we'll start with just a normal purchase order. So I open the purchase orders. I'm going to look up a purchase order I already have in here. So I'll just select purchase order 0997. You see it has one phone that we want to send. And we're going to print the purchase order document. So when I print the document, we're going to use other form. Now I'll click print. Let's cancel that out. Okay. So now for this, I want to send it to the screen. And I'm having trouble seeing some of the options on my screen, on my side here. So bear with me. So here we go. Now we're sending it to the screen. And so this is the form that you will have print. This was the report that I set up within the SQL reporting services. And you see you can customize with images. I put the IBIS logo on this one. The vendor address, which can be pulled from multiple locations within your system. The ship to address, and then how you want to have each line item displayed. This can be very customizable. You can have, let's say in quantity, you can have as many or as few decimal places as you would like. You can add additional information up here with the purchase order and order date. You can locate them really wherever you'd like on the form. Anything you can set up within SQL Server reporting services, you can have print from Forms Printer within Microsoft Dynamics GP. So that was the purchase order entry right here. Now, let's say we want to send one to a file now. So I'm going to open this again. We're going to print. We're going to use the other form. Again, only this time we're going to use the printer or delivery system. The delivery system in this case was sending it to the file. So when I select printer or delivery system, it's going to ask me if I would like to print or use the delivery system. The delivery system in this case is sending it to the file. To print would just be to send it to a printer. So I do want to use the delivery system. So that has sent it to the folder purchase orders on my desktop. So we'll go ahead and double check that. I'll open, I have it already open here, purchase orders. And you see the advanced purchase order 0997. It was just modified, so you can see the date modified at today's date and just a few moments ago. And if I had already had one saved here, let's say a file that I printed earlier that was for this purchase order, it would be automatically overwritten. It will not just append it or add numbers to the end. So you want to be careful there that you don't have something saved that you want to keep and accidentally overwrite it when printing. So you see, I double-click that, and it opens the PDF file of the same thing. So the file now exists, and you can send the file in an email or have the file just saved for your own records. So since all I have is the Fabricam company set up, I do not have additional email addresses to send to. But the email functionality is there, and it is very useful when set up correctly. So now that you've seen just the very basics of Forms Printer, you can send me the email either at info@ibisinc.com, or if you'd like to contact me directly at acollins@ibisinc.com, I will do my best to get the answer and send it back.